is a look at the June 2021 Human and Social Biology Paper 2, which starts off with the instructions. It lets you know that there are 2 hours to do the exam. You have to do all 6 questions and the necessary 5 usual instructions that you would expect in front of the paper. As we go on to begin the paper, we are greeted with a nothing has been omitted. And this simply means that there is nothing to be expected on this page of the paper. Remember, when these booklets are being printed, they must print with even numbers. So depending on how long the paper is, sometimes they have to insert blank sheets. And once a blank sheet is inserted, they would print on it, nothing has been omitted. So a candidate does not think that their page has a missing print, right? So we go on to begin the question, section A. Question 1, and just seeing the title of this table, this lets us know that the topic is reproduction, and reproduction is found in section B, life processes. So let's read. This is question 1, part A. Table 1 shows some of the steps involved in the birth process. Complete the table by correctly numbering each step to show the correct order in the birth process. So we have the order of steps. So you have to insert numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the correct order, and that will complete the activity. 1 mark for each insertion, so a total of 4 marks. So I always recommend to candidates that they either do this forwards or backwards. Don't start in between. Forwards or backwards, don't start in between. Find the start or find the end. So simply reading it, baby is expelled head first, release of oxytocin, rhythmic contractions resulting in baby being pushed through the cervix and the vagina, expulsion of the placenta. Some persons, if you have older parents, you may know this as the afterbirth. This is the last step. So we will give that number 4. It's only 4 steps, so we are obviously using the numbers 1 to 4. Rhythmic contractions resulting in the baby being pushed through. The baby is expelled head first. All right, so that is number 3. This comes before the baby is expelled. So this would be number 2. And the process starts off with this hormone, oxytocin, which is released to get the whole process of the labor and the birthing process kick-started. State 2 reliable methods of birth control. We want reliable methods. Natural contraceptive is not identified as a reliable method, so you could just state the methods and that will be it. Table 2 shows data collected in 5 Caribbean countries comparing the number of live births of women who attended antenatal clinics versus women who did not attend antenatal clinics. Antenatal is before they have given birth, they attend the clinic, they visit the doctor, they visit the health center. All right, this is before, this is pre. Prenatal, you may also hear it depending on the book you're reading. You may see them say prenatal or it may be antenatal. So we have Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname. The number who attended, this is women who attended clinics. Remember, this is births per 100 women, right? So these attended 60 for Grenada, 45 for Guyana, Jamaica had 75, Trinidad had 85, and Tobago, Suriname had 26. And the women who did not attend antenatal clinics, notice the birth rates are lower, live birth rates. So it means they had more children dying. On the grid provided on page 7, plot a bar graph to show the live birth rates of the number of women who attend antenatal clinics and the women who did not attend antenatal clinics for each country shown in table 1. They have already identified that you are plotting a bar graph. You're plotting a bar graph. So it's not a line graph, it's a bar graph. They tell you which one to plot and they tell you what to plot. All right, so it's the live birth rates of women who attended antenatal clinics. It's these numbers here. And the woman who did not attend antenatal clinics, which are these numbers here. So a total of 10 bars will be plotted for each country. Right, a total of 10 bars. You have to plot 2 for each country. Grenada has 2, Guyana has 2, Jamaica has 2, Trinidad and Tobago has 2, Suriname has 2. That's a total of 10 bars. So let's go ahead and do that now. This is how your graph should look. 2 bars for each country, the total of 10 bars, and they do reach up. We have utilized more than 75% of the graph page. So we would get the 5 marks. We made sure and put in our scales for this y-axis. We use 2 centimeters to equal 10 units. And this is the birth rates here. And you would not be shading your graphs, but you would put in some distinction to identify the different bars, and you will give a key for the antenatal visits and the no antenatal visits. So this is how your graph should have looked to obtain your 5 marks. Now that we have obtained our 5 marks, we can continue on. State which country had the highest number of live births as a result of their women attending antenatal clinics. So it means we are looking at these numbers here. And the highest one is 85 for Trinidad and Tobago. Suggests one reason why some countries had low live birth rates, even though their women attended antenatal clinics. And the simple answer is there could be a lack of medical resources. They might need specific medicine to treat certain illnesses that women can develop during pregnancies. And if you don't have access or the resource, then a lack of medical resources can cause death. So, a lack of medical resources. And another simple one that you could have given is a lack of education with respect to how knowledgeable persons are to seek treatment, antenatal treatment, how developed the nation is, how developed the country is. That all surrounds education. And the antenatal clinics to determine the health of the mothers and their babies. The study showed that the mothers who breastfed their babies were healthier, and so were their babies. Suggests one reason for good health in the breastfeeding mothers and one reason for good health in the breastfed babies. And breastfeeding does wonders for women. Breastfeeding does wonders for women, not to mention it helps the baby a lot. One such wonder is it helps to promote the metabolism of the mother who just gave birth. She wants her metabolism to be high. She wants to rebound out of pregnancy. Remember, her body has come out of pregnancy. There are changes to be expected. Breastfeeding helps promote such changes. And for the baby, a benefit that you could have listed for the baby is that breastfeeding is a complete meal. Breastfeeding for the baby is a complete meal, and it doesn't even require water. That's how complete it is. Not to mention the whole immunity cocktail. It's like a baby getting an immunity shot straight from the mother, straight from the breast milk of the mother. So 15 marks for that question. As we move on to question 2, we see we are dabbling in section A, living organisms and the environment. And figure 1 shows the diagram of part of a food chain. Organism X, organism Y, eaten by organism Z. State what the arrows labeled A represents in the food chain that they presented us. And arrows in a food chain is the transfer of energy. It shows the direction in which the energy is being transferred. So it means the energy is being transferred from X to Y, or the energy is being transferred from Y to Z, right? The organism that is doing the eating, the predator, is the one receiving the energy. Organism Y doesn't have to be a predator, it could be a herbivore. It is not a predator. Herbivore is not a predator. It cannot hunt the plant, but it is still doing the eating. State what is occurring at the label arrow B in figure 1. And if we see that there's oxygen being taken in, and then there's carbon dioxide being given out, that is an indicator that respiration is happening there. Identify the organism that is the primary consumer and the organism that is the producer in the food chain. They ask for the primary consumer first. Primary means first, so they ask which organism is the first to do consuming, and that organism is Y. And the producer is always the start of the food chain. The producer is the one that uses the sunlight, which in this case will be organism that is labeled S. So 2 easy marks for that question. Stacy walks into her garden and sees mealybugs feeding on the leaves of her proton plant. To protect the plant, she introduces ladybugs to eat the mealybugs. Stacy becomes upset when she notices a frog eating her recently purchased ladybugs. Later that day, Stacy sees a garden snake eating the frog. Construct a food chain to represent the information provided in the scenario above. And just reading it, take it one step at a time. The croton plant eaten by the mealybugs, eaten by the ladybugs, eaten by the frog, eaten by the garden snake. And you put arrows in a forward direction to show which one is doing the eating. A month later, Stacy finds the garden snake dead and decomposing in her yard. Name 2 types of organisms that would be responsible for the snake's decay: fungi and bacteria. You could use fungi and bacteria. Stacy removes the dead snake from her yard, and instead of throwing it in the bush, buries it near the roots of the croton plant. Explain how Stacy's action would be beneficial to the croton plant. What she's actually doing there is she is participating in the recycling of nutrients. The recycling of nutrients, the snake will decay, and as it decomposes, it breaks down the organic matter to inorganic matter, which makes plants now have access to it in the soil to be able to use it. State whether or not Stacy would have the same number of snakes in her yard as frogs. They tell you what to state. State whether or not. So this is a yes or no question. Does she have the same number of snakes in her yard as frogs? And the answer is a loud no. On to question 3. And if we are looking at the skin as a topic comes into play at excretion and homeostasis, which is section B, life process. So we are looking at the skin here, and they give a sample, a cross section of the skin, and they ask us to identify each structure labeled A and B of the skin. So looking at A, we see it is pointing to the muscle, the erector muscle. Depending on which book you're reading, who is the author, they may say here erector muscle, they may just say erector muscle, they may say skin erector muscle, but nevertheless, it's an erector muscle. Structure B, you see that there is no follicle coming out of the top of this structure, which means it is a pore and it is a sweat gland. All right, down here is the sweat gland, and they labeled it higher up. It would have been a sweat pore. Complete the paragraph below by selecting 2 correct responses from the words and phrases provided in the box below. We have a negative feedback, positive feedback, control of body temperature, and childbirth. So that's what they have given us. So let's read the passage and insert the correct one. Homeostasis is the way in which constant conditions are maintained in the body despite changes in the environment. When the body detects changes within its environment and produces a response to bring it back to normal, this is described as a negative feedback mechanism. An example of a negative feedback mechanism is control of body temperature. Considering we looked at a childbirth question already, and this topic is excretion and homeostasis, this has nothing to do with childbirth. So everyone knew that childbirth was absolutely not the answer. State 2 responses, which occur in the body when carbon dioxide levels in the blood increase. And if we are thinking that carbon dioxide has gone up, it means something has happened to your breathing. So hyperventilation is in place many times. That's where you breathe and pant plenty, quick, short breaths. The activity, whatever activity you were doing, you would need to stop that activity. And carbon dioxide is an acidic gas. So acidity means lowering the pH. So the pH of the blood decreases. So those are just two of the responses. There are more responses. You could always let us know which responses you chose to use in the comments. A group of friends go to a party and drink excessive amounts of alcoholic beverages, which are rich in carbohydrates. After drinking, they experience frequent urination, and the following day suffered from extreme thirst. Explain why the friends experience each of the following signs/symptoms, and they start off with frequent urination. Remember, alcoholic beverages are liquids. So if you are drinking plenty liquids, whether the liquid's flavored or not, your body still needs to get rid of the plenty liquids. So your body will expel high amounts of liquids. That's the reason for the frequent urination. Right? You can't just take in liquids and expect to keep them inside of you. So you will need to urinate plenty. The extreme thirst came about the following day. It's stated up here. And the following day suffered from extreme thirst. So this did not happen the same time. So thirst happens because plenty liquids are gone. So now you have to find some way to get the liquid part of your blood back. Yeah, in many instances, this results in you being just thirsty. All right, you have the high amounts of sugar in your blood and low amounts of water. So you need to get back that water. You need to retain the water, which means your body will indicate that you are thirsty. In addition to frequent urination and extreme thirst, one of the friends, Pedro is the friend, experienced dizzy spells and lethargy the next day. State the effects that drinking alcoholic beverage would have on Pedro's blood glucose level. So if we're thinking about blood glucose level, remember, this is a negative feedback mechanism. Glucose is a negative feedback mechanism. So it means if he has been drinking, and they already told us that the alcoholic beverage is high in glucose, it means his glucose levels will increase. Explain how Pedro's body would respond to eliminate the stated effect. Pedro's body should do the negative feedback mechanism, which allows insulin to be secreted. It will allow insulin to be secreted. Insulin converts glucose to glycogen for storage in places like the liver and the muscles. All right. This becomes problematic when insulin is not released, which leads us right into the next question, suggest the disease that Pedro is most likely suffering from and state why he would have experienced dizzy spells and lethargy. This means that something is wrong. Which disease results in uncontrolled glucose levels in the blood? You know that as diabetes, a very popular disease in the Caribbean. Too much glucose in your blood, your pancreas is maybe not working as it should. Maybe the insulin isn't having the desired effect. This, both instances, means diabetes, your blood glucose is uncontrolled. A total of 15 marks for this question. Question 4. Question 4 from section E, the impact of health practices on the environment. Table 3 shows the steps involved in large-scale purification of water from a dam. Complete table 3 by numbering each step. So you have all these steps to number, similar to a question that we did earlier, but now instead of it being 4 steps like in the birth question, it is now 5 steps and they have done one for you. All right, it says 1 step has been numbered for you, so number 2 has been done for you. Air is mixed vigorously into tanks with wastewater. Disposal of effluent, and if we are disposing of the effluent, that means we are at the end. So already this is jumping out to us as being the 5th step. Removal of non-biodegradable material, breakdown of organic materials by microorganisms. I always prefer to do these questions backwards. So I will start off with number 5, which is the disposal of the effluent. We will find number 4, the breakdown of the organic material by microorganisms. Number 3, air has to be mixed. Remember, these microorganisms are living. They need to respire. Number 3, number 2 has been done for us. So we just have number 1, which is the removal of non-biodegradable material. State 2 ways in which human activity could negatively impact water supply. So we are talking about how you could contaminate water at any level. So whether you're doing farming, you're doing logging, you're doing mining, or any other activity, all of these are human activities that negatively impact water supplies, and there are many more. Leah lives in a rural village where most residents make their living by raising animals and growing crops. Recent rains have left the village flooded, and Leah plays in the flood water from early in the morning to late in the evening. State the 2 contaminants that Leah and her community would be exposed to after the flood. Remember, it's a rural village, plus they raise animals and grow crops. So contaminants, the village, it will have sewage, unprocessed animal feces. Yeah, sewage animal feces, that's so already. She has chemicals in the water because they're doing planting, they are planting crops. So we could pick fertilizers just as a throwing, but otherwise we would have already answered this question. Suggests 3 diseases that Leah and her community are likely to contract as a result of the flooding. And you could have had some fun with this question, because if it's flooding, think of mosquitoes. If it's flooding, think of mosquitoes. The stages of the mosquitoes, 3 of them live in water: the eggs, the larva, and the pupa all come with water. So you could have picked mosquito diseases, or you could have picked one of the others: cholera, typhoid, gastroenteritis. So you did have quite a few options for this question. Recommend 4 precautions that the residents could take during the flooding crisis to prevent the spread of diseases. First one, stop playing in the water. Leah was playing in the water whole day. A precaution would be to stop playing in the water. Additionally, if that one wasn't as obvious as it should have been, you could pick any of these. You could boil water before use, because remember, persons have to drink water. You could do the chlorination process, whereby you add chlorine, a specific amount of chlorine to water. If you have pre-bought bottled water, that will be even safer to use. Stay out of the water-affected areas. Evacuate the high ground or dry ground, and use only canned foods. You don't want to use contaminated food. 15 marks for this question. As we move into question 5, they tell us about the human skeleton, which means we are into another life process question, that's section B, and this time it is the skeletal system, and they're asking us to identify 2 bones located in the chest region of the skeleton. You could pick the ribs, you have the sternum, that chest bone, that will get you the 2 marks. State 2 functions of the skeleton other than moving or movement, and support, protection, production of blood cells. Remember, your red blood cells, white blood cells are produced in your bones, long bones, and ribs and sternum also produce blood cells. Compare the movement of a joint. They are looking at the hinge joint with the movement of a ball and socket joint. So we are comparing, it's 2 marks, so it doesn't require us to do much. We just need to say how each one moves. All right, a ball and socket moves 360 degrees, which is the same as all direction. A hinge joint moves along one plane, which is 180 degrees, or a straight line. After class, Tina was having an argument about ligaments and tendons. She believes that ligaments and tendons are the same because both are made up of connective tissue and are attached to bones. Explain why Tina's belief was not entirely accurate. And they give you a lot of lines to express yourself. And the question is only worth 5 marks, but look how many lines they give. But that is fine. Persons write at different lengths, but simply they want you to identify what is a tendon, what is a ligament. They are connective tissues. That's why she is partially right. And the question says she was not entirely accurate. She was partially accurate. They are connective tissues, but tendons attach muscle to bone and ligaments attach bone to bone. The injury-wise tendons, you do the strain. Ligaments, you do sprain. All right, that's a simple way to remember it. But if that was too intense for you, you could go ahead and write it all out. Even in their functionality, you could have explained, you could have given examples in order to support your explanation to make sure you obtain the 5 marks. A middle-aged man goes to the clinic complaining of stiff, painful joints and a decrease in mobility, suggests the condition from which he most likely suffers, and explain how he may have developed this condition. So his condition, because he is middle-aged, means he has had a certain amount of life thus far. He's not elderly, so he hasn't reached over 60, but he's middle-aged, which means he is from late 40s into 50s. So all 47, 55, all of there is around middle age. So it means he has used his body for at least a minimum of 40 years. So his condition is arthritis. Remember, it already said he is middle-aged, right? Arthritis is progressive in terms of this chronic. It develops over time, over use. He has been using these joints, these limbs for 40+ years, and his body is experiencing the wear and tear of the connective connective tissue. But you could go on to write this in extreme detail, talk about arthritis and the decrease in his cartilage, the synovial fluids, etc. But it is just 4 marks. The reason they give you so much lines is for you to express yourself, especially when they ask questions with explain or describe, because not everyone can write concisely. They give a certain amount of lines for you to express yourself, even give examples in how the thing may happen. Some persons may accompany this with a drawing, a label drawing, that will help your answer if you are not perfectly good with the words. Question 6. Hereditary and variation. Hereditary and variation is the section. This is from section C. Section C. But this question, we will see they merge it into another section. Section D, we identify the Aedes aegypti mosquito. That is from section D, which is diseases and their impact on humans. So let's do the hereditary and variation part in part A. Continuous variation. State one example of continuous variation and state one example of discontinuous variation. We know that continuous variation is anything that is on a spectrum that continues. There is no right or wrong for it. Many times it is something involving size or something that could produce a slight change. There is no correct height. No matter how tall you are, it is correct. No matter how short you are, it is correct. Your hand size has no specific set size. You could be whatever hand size you want. Your head size. There are many other examples you could use to get you the marks in this question. Likewise, for continuous variation, there are specific categories for this. So it's either or, yes or no. Either your eyes are blue or they are not. Either your eyes are black or they are not. Either you can tongue roll or you cannot. So there are specific categories that indicates an example of discontinuous variation. State 2 reasons why genetic variation is important to organisms. And many persons may have heard someone say, variety is the spice of life. Yes. Variety or differences allow for new characteristics in the breeding population, right? So that is genetic variation. That's one of the reasons it's important to organisms. Also, what if everyone was identical? Then if one organism gets a disease, wouldn't all the others get it as well? But if you are genetically different, then it means the species does not die out from one disaster event. All right? So having differences is valuable. Section B, which looks at the section D part of it with the Aedes aegypti mosquito that lives in warm climates and lays its eggs in stagnant water. Meteorologists predict that the Caribbean will have longer dry seasons, but when it rains, it will often result in flooding. Surprisingly, scientists predict that there could be an increase in the spread of mosquito-borne diseases during the long dry seasons. Name the disease that the Aedes aegypti mosquito carries and identify one other mosquito-borne disease, dengue. And one other disease, Zika. Now, you could have used other disease, chikungunya, etc. But these are the ones we chose to use. Explain why scientists are predicting that long dry seasons could increase levels of mosquito-borne diseases because of the eggs being laid in stagnant water. The larva and the pupa also live in stagnant water. So 3 parts of the mosquito's life cycle is in water. So if you have flooding in the dry season, that is water available for mosquitoes to breeding. All right? So the flooding supports the life cycle of the mosquitoes. 3 marks for this part of the question. Brendan is a 10-year-old boy who does not like to bathe or change his dirty clothes. Aside from an awful body odor, explained to Brendan 3 health challenges he may experience as a result of these practices. Now, Brendan should really change his clothes, because hygiene is not just about smelling good, it's social acceptance. It's social acceptance. You want persons to accept you, you want persons to talk to you, etc. That's valuable, especially for your social health, meaning your interaction with your peers, and for your mental health. So social acceptance decreases because he does not bathe and change his clothes. His appearance will show it. He puts himself at risk for infections. Something as simple as lice in his hair now becomes a real problem for him. He could have athlete's foot, fungi, all right, ringworm. These are infections because he isn't bathing. Mosquitoes and parasites. Now, mosquitoes are attracted to a more bushy smell, which is what happens when you don't bathe for long periods of time. It's the same reasons why mosquitoes are more likely to go after a pig or a dog than a human. They are smelling worse than a human. But if Brandon does not bathe and does not change his clothes for a period of time, he will be smelling bad. Mosquitoes will be attracted to him. So that becomes a health challenge. All of this you could have said with all the lines you have. 2 marks for each health challenge identified to give you a 6 marks to wrap up this paper with a last set of 15 marks. So do let us know if these answers were acceptable to you, but this would conclude the May-June 2021 paper. Do let us know by subscribing to encourage us to do more papers that you may want to see answered.